And we're back. I've done a couple more little mountings up and down on either of the four rods that we're using, and I'm going to show you how, as you move through creating your spike weave, you will need to move the rods within the frame that we're creating. So what I've got here, you'll see that I've moved some of my spike weave off the rods. Now, a lot of people, when they first start looking at the spike weave, they're tempted to do the whole lot. They're going to have really long rods, they're going to wind all the wires on and make it look super neat. The problem that you get then is there's a huge amount of tension and friction in trying to remove the rods. I'm not a sciencey person, but the more mountings you have on the rods when you try to remove them, it becomes much more difficult. So my personal theory is you do a mounting, you make it all squashed up nice and neat and tidy, you do a second one, and then you wiggle the rods along, and I'm going to show you that wiggling motion just now. So let's say that I have just created these last two mountings. I'm going to make sure that they're squished up nice and tightly. Before I crush, I'm always ensuring that that wire at the back there is smooth and flat, so that I'm not bending it in a way that will weaken it later. So you can see I've currently got 3 mountings on the ends of the rods. I need to carefully, with the rest of my hand, just support the remainder here, and then the 3 mountings that we've got on the rods I'm going to put between thumb and forefinger and a little bit onto the second finger. Now what I'm going to do is start by moving along the rod, which is technically number 4, the top of the mountains. The reason I start at rod number 4 is that there is the least resistance on this one. If I start on the rod that has the most resistance, it can be quite tough, and you'll get into the technique of pulling the rod out. What can happen is then you move to a rod which has slightly less resistance, but you're still in hench mode, and you very, very strongly remove it, and the rod comes out completely, and then you have to feed it back in, which is a pain in the bottom. So what we're going to do is start on the rod with the least amount of resistance, and as we go through the process, you will find that you'll need to apply a little bit more pressure to remove that piece, and in that way we kind of train ourselves not to overdo it. So back to the board, I'm going to start by supporting all of those mountings as we discussed, and then just gently wiggling, and you can see that that comes out quite easily. We're just moving that along, and I'm always keeping the last 1 or 2 peaks inside the framework. The next one we're going to move, that's quite easy. Again, you will see the third one we're starting to get a bit more resistance, and then the fourth one, or the base wire here, sorry, I've just done those in the wrong number order. We've got 4 little segments that are still on that wire, so we just very carefully need to wiggle that whilst supporting the frame. And on it goes. So what I'm going to do is very quickly just run through that process one last time of how to create that weave. I'm going to free myself off some of this lovely wire, hopefully without destroying my entire desk. So we're going to go twice around the base wire and the number 2, keeping that nice and firm, and then we're going around 2 and 3 together, always in that same direction, like so. Getting attacked by another piece of wire on my desk, obviously, and then around those last 2, pulling them into position, like so, and then back in the other direction. Always doing 2 at a time, always in the same direction. We're nearly there, so just going to finish off with a wrap 1, a wrap 2, and then we're finishing, if you remember, with 2 wraps around that base wire. Before I do any cutting, I'm going to make sure that that wire is smooth up against the back and push them up nice and tightly. Give them a good old squish. This is making sure that the shape is set on the framework. Flip that over, and as close as I can get, trim the wire away. I'm just going to push this out of the way for the moment, and you can see that we're left with 3 peaks on our rods that we're using as tools. I'm just going to make sure that that's all nice and neat and tight, and I'm happy with that. And again, we're going to support the work that we've done already and start by completely withdrawing number 4, number 3, number 2, and at this point you do need to make sure that you're keeping this nice and flat. It will turn and twist, don't worry about that, we can fix that as we go along. And then the last rod you can grip as close to those little peaks as you possibly can and just give that a wiggle and out it comes. And you should be left with a piece of probably twisted, and that's because of the tension that we've put into it. And just to get that nice and flat, what we don't want to do is be rough with this wire. We're going to support it and just bring it gently back into true so that we've got a nice length of spike weave to work with. So there's the one that I prepared a little bit earlier on, and you will notice if I put my earlier on one on the board upside down, you can see the difference. Now it's still quite an interesting weave, but it is very, very asymmetrical. So you'll have kind of 3 peaks going up on one side and singles coming down the other side. Looks a bit like a New York skyline. If you want to use it in that fashion, please do. Back to the board. I prefer to use it like that because it looks nice and symmetrical. Now, before I show you how to thread that onto a section of wire and to make a complete circle with it, I want to show you some of the applications, some of the pieces that I've made in the past utilising the spike weave. So this is a pendant which uses the spike weave with little crystals set between the base wire, like so. They would be inserted here one by one on a wire as it passes through, and then a second wire going around the outside and a larger crystal between those peaks. So that's an application. At the very simplest side, we can just drop a little gemstone down in the centre. We can also use this to set cabochons, and there's another variation using crystals, and nice smoky coloured crystals on this occasion. Obviously, as well as our lovely Adam West Dragon, you can use quite small segments to augment other designs that you've already created. So I'm just going to pop those out of the way. We can pop our rods out of the way now, and I have a short length here. This again is 0.6mm gauge silver plated copper core wire, supplier in the details below. So what I'm going to do is take the section that we've just created, make sure that I'm looking at it correct way up, and I'm going to run. Now this length of wire is probably around about 16 inches, and I'm going to start by passing that through where the base wire sat. Now because we used a 1.25mm gauge base wire, you can utilise up to a 1.25 wire to go through. You will struggle a little bit to get a 1.25 back through. So consider, as I said earlier, the size of the rods that you're going to use as to the project that you're looking to create at the end. Now the simplest way to use a spike weave is to create a sun-like circular design, and I'm just going to take that end of wire through again in the same direction as it began. Now it's not difficult, but it is fiddly. So just going to start passing that through. It's much easier if you can get that up close to your face, but you can see it just slots through quite nicely. That 1.6mm gauge wire, the 0.6mm gauge wire fitting quite neatly into position. And I'm just going to feed that through, following the line of the second wire, and you'll see that the face of the wire has come out. Very, very gently, I'm going to support the piece that we're working on and draw those two ends together. And you just work little by little to draw the pieces into true, and then you end up with that flush situation. Now what you can do is take one of your tails upwards, and you can utilise that to attach it to a bail. Take the other one downwards, and if you wanted to, you could sit a large gemstone in the centre, or you can take those both up, weave them together to create that bail. It's entirely up to you. That is the basics of your spike weave tutorial. I hope that you found that useful. As I said to you earlier on in the video, hopefully in the future I'll be able to bring you some complete projects utilising the spike weave, but it is lovely and versatile. Just think about the size of your base wires. I have woven spike weave in the past with a 0.5mm gauge. That works quite nicely. If you're using 0.4mm gauge to wrap around the rods, if it's for, say, wall art or a decorative addition to something like Adam West Dragon, then that's not a problem at all. I think I used quite fine wire for Adam's hairdo. But if you are using it in jewellery, going lower than a 0.5mm gauge, it will deform quite easily in wear. So At the other end of the scale, I have created spike weave with a 0.8mm gauge wire, and that is very wearing on your fingers. It took me a month to get over losing all the skin. You can put plasters on, you can put cotton gloves on. There is even a proprietary band which you can wrap around for your weaving fingers. I don't personally get on well with it, but you can always have a look and give it a try. So I hope that you have enjoyed your spike weave tutorial. As I say, I didn't invent it, but I find it very inspirational, very useful in so many different ways. And until next time, I'll see you soon. Bye bye.